Alright, so originally my hope was that I would be able to do an entire dedicated video just on the Steam Summer Sale, but unfortunately last week just kind of got away from me, so I ended up just doing a community post where I showed a few of the games that I was excited to pick up myself. So today I just wanted to take a closer look at a few of the games that I did grab during the Summer Sale and how they perform on the Steam Deck. Sadly not the Steam Machine, because much to my chagrin I have not yet been picked up to grab one of the 2TB models, but hopefully we'll see soon. And also I did want to go over a few physical games that I picked up recently, although I suppose I should say I use that term kind of loosely for reasons we'll get into in a little bit. But for now, let's kick this off with one of the games that I did grab during the Summer Sale, and that would be a game that had been on my wishlist for a while. I'd always wanted to check it out, and that would be Zero Wing. And I had seen this game pop up my recommended list a number of times over the past several years, but I just never took the leap for whatever reason, and finally it grabbed my attention and I did pick it up during the Steam Summer Sale. And one of the things that just did not compute for me was I had no idea this was the exact same game that brought us the "All Your Base Are Belong to Us" meme. Or maybe I did know it and I just forgot it, but either way I was still pretty surprised to hear that, although unfortunately I will say that that meme does not appear in this version of the game. Apparently that was reserved for, I think, the Sega Genesis or Sega Master System version of the game. It must be Genesis, someone's gonna have to correct me on that. And while I don't have any old school nostalgia for the game, because I don't think I ever played it in its arcade form or on home console growing up, I was still excited to play it just because there were tons of games that I played in that vein whenever I was growing up, and even though this particular shooter was not featured on it, I feel like I saw a lot of games from this genre that were always being showcased on Nick Arcade back in the day, which is a very old show from Nickelodeon in the early 90s. And I have to say, I think I got exactly what I wanted out of this game. It feels like a standard arcade shooter in the vein of something like Gradius. The enemies are very cool, and some of the boss fights in particular just really popped on screen, and I had a lot more fun than I thought I would. It also seems like it has a pretty decent amount of weapon variety, and the controls are great, not just for shooting or bombs, but you also have this tractor beam as well, which I did not make great use of, but you can use it to capture small or mid-sized enemies and then use them as a shield, which is kinda rad. But beyond the direct control of your ship, even the emulation style controls that they threw in for things like fast forward or rewinding or save states, all that stuff feels really good, and it also made it very easy to hop into this game and have a good time regardless of what your skill level is. Even though I play shmups and I enjoy them, I'm not very good at them, so the fact that I could just instantly rewind or kind of reverse a terrible decision that I made that just led to me losing a ship really is a huge draw for me as somebody who, again, is not great at these games, but I do appreciate playing them here and there. And perhaps unsurprisingly, as a 2D retro throwback, the game has absolutely no difficulties running on the Steam Deck at all. And again, all of the controls were immediately approachable and intuitive. I don't think I would call it one of the best shoot-em-ups I've played or anything, but again, I'm not necessarily a connoisseur of this genre, more so just kind of a tourist, and I appreciate the variety in what I saw. Now next up is a game that you absolutely cannot play on the Steam Deck, on PC, or really anywhere else except for the Nintendo Switch unless you dive into some emulation, and that would be Cruis'n Blast. I mean, I guess if you found the arcade machine, you could play it there technically, but yeah, as far as home console goes, you can only play it on the Nintendo Switch. But the sad thing about this particular entry for the Nintendo Switch is that it just got delisted from digital, so you can only get it physically now. I mean, obviously you can re-download it if you'd purchased it previously, but yeah, if you were looking to buy this and check it out and you're like, oh yeah, I remember the Cruis'n series, and one day I'm gonna check that out kind of like I was, well, now the only way you can get it is if you happen to find it out in the wild, and that's exactly what happened to me when it showed up at my local GameStop. So a couple of weeks back, I took advantage of a buy two get one free sale, finally popped it in, and I was a little bit skeptical at first because I kind of grew up alongside the Cruis'n series. The first one that I remember playing was on the Nintendo 64, and that would have been Cruis'n USA, and then I think it was like a year or two later, the roller rink in the small town that I grew up in actually got an arcade machine for Cruis'n Exotica. But yeah, suffice it to say, as somebody who is not a huge fan of like really technical racers and prefers the arcade experience, I've always had a soft spot for the Cruis'n series. And that's exactly why I featured those games so prominently whenever I did videos on the Analog 3D and the M64. And while I would say that the earliest entries of the Cruis'n series are pretty basic by today's standards, I do feel like each successive entry got just a little bit better by and large. And when it came to Cruis'n Blast, I was only skeptical because I wasn't sure if it would still kind of capture the magic or the fun from those earlier entries. Although I'm happy to report now, having played it, that it is undeniably my favorite of the Cruis'n series, bar none. And I think the reason I'm enjoying it so much is because this game really is just sort of sanded down to a mirror finish. It is raw arcade action with no apologies, where you can drift, do stunts, boosts, takedowns, just everything you would really want from an arcade racer is executed very well here. Although it is worth pointing out, as much as I'm loving this game, it is so frictionless almost to a fault. It's a super approachable game, even on medium difficulty, and like, it's impossible to miss the opening boost, but the biggest thing that I notice is that it's almost impossible to come to a full stop in this game. And I think that makes a lot of sense and is a really smart move, but it is a little bit off-putting, I think, because Cruis'n Blast has basically boiled the arcade racer experience down to one very simple principle, and that is going fast feels good, going slow does not feel good. And I think in service to that, what they did was sort of made it that every obstacle you could possibly run into when you're racing against other racers, aside from just like, rushing somebody off the road, I guess, but any like sign or bush or anything that you might run into, it might slow you down imperceptibly just a little bit and take away from your time, but it never brings you to a complete stop or makes you spin out in such a dramatic way that it feels like, oh man, now I have to catch up and I have to deal with a bunch of rubber banding, and now what do I have to do to kind of get back in line with the pack? Like, it's really good about sort of keeping you towards the front. And even though I personally appreciate that, I can see a lot of racing fans, especially arcade racing fans, maybe taking issue with it because it just feels a little bit too forgiving in spots. But if it's the kind of thing that doesn't really matter to you, Cruis'n Blast is a lot of arcade racing fun. I think it has at least 24 tracks and a ton of licensed cars, which is probably the exact reason it ended up being delisted from Nintendo to begin with. But yeah, if you do want to bomb around in a Camaro or a Nissan 350Z, this game will definitely let you do that. Again, assuming you can find it somewhere nearby, because it is not available for purchase anymore on the digital storefront. So yeah, assuming you don't mind tracking down a physical copy of it or just straight up emulating it on the Steam Deck, it is definitely a good time. And if you were previously a fan of the Cruis'n games, you're probably going to find a lot to love here as well. And speaking of unfortunate developments in physical media, this next entry is the only PlayStation 5 physical game that I have on this list, and I use that term loosely because it's kind of a sick mockery of physical media because it is a disc that requires you to have the internet to install the game, but that would be Assassin's Creed Black Flag. And historically, I've not been like the biggest Assassin's Creed fan. I kind of hop around that series a lot. Like when the first game came out, I definitely enjoyed my time with it, but I don't think I was really ready for just how many Assassin's Creeds would get produced through the years. And at a certain point, I just got kind of fatigued by the series and only would hop in every now and then. But Assassin's Creed Black Flag is one that does hold a special place in my heart as one of the games that I remember fondly playing during the PlayStation 4's opening life cycle. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it was a must-buy for me, but I just appreciate the gameplay of it so much and that sort of pirate-themed setting that's enough to get me really excited for it. And I still contend that I think a lot of the developers who probably worked on the Assassin's Creed series through the years probably didn't want to be necessarily chained to the lore of Assassin's Creed, and they just wanted to make really cool, like, period piece games, and I think this is probably one of the best examples of what they put out in that regard. And I'm sure there are some interesting lore bits when it comes to the deeper story and mythos surrounding the Assassin's Creed franchise. I'm just saying, for me, I was mostly interested in an exciting pirate game, and that's exactly what this game is giving me. And again, I remember just being so pumped to play this on the PS4 when it first dropped, and it was a gorgeous game then, and it's a gorgeous game now in its updated form. Just, it is a little bit more, I don't want to say sanitized, but it definitely has like that prettier sheen about it, right? I guess I'm expecting it to look a little bit grimier than what it looks, but that's the thing. I'm not saying the graphics are bad. On a technical level, I think they look fantastic. I'm just saying that I think something was kind of lost in the transition to this remake. But from a gameplay perspective, it's pretty much exactly what I remember for the most part. And it's still super fun just running around doing parkour to get everywhere, taking part in fun sea battles, and switching it up between blending in with a crowd, or just rolling the dice and trying to take down multiple enemies simultaneously. And all of this is gloriously steeped in a 1700s pirate adventure. And I wouldn't say it's doing anything exceptionally new and removed from the original, and it's still a Ubisoft game through and through, for better or worse, but it remains chock full of fun pirate gameplay. And it's still rife with interesting characters, and certainly it's been updated to provide a more vivid experience. Which, even though the visual overhaul is one of its primary draws, I do think people are going to be a little bit split on it between taking artistic liberties, but then also it is just kind of jarring to see how the updated engine looks a little bit more plasticky than the original. I wouldn't say it removes all of the grit of the original, but it's definitely got a slightly different vibe, so yeah, if you're a veteran, this is probably going to be a little bit jarring, but if that kind of thing doesn't bother you, or you're coming into a brand new, or effectively brand new, it's still pretty to look at outside of a few Uncanny Valley-ish NPC character models, I guess. But just the same, I'm having a really good time with it, and again, as somebody who considers himself to be a seasonal gamer where certain games just make more sense in the middle of summertime, this would definitely be on my list of favorite summertime games. And speaking of physical games that aren't really physical games, but are kind of physical games, I did have one Switch 2 pickup that I wanted to talk about, and that would be for The Adventures of Elliot. And honestly, even including this on the list is a bit of a cheat, because technically speaking, I'm only playing the demo right now, but that's because the demo carries over into the main game, so yeah, I just haven't had a reason to open it yet, because the demo is something like 5 or 10 hours long, so there's still plenty more for me to play there before I have to actually open the game up. And I'll admit, when I first saw this game, I didn't have a ton of excitement about it because, honestly, HD 2D feels like it's popping up everywhere, which isn't necessarily bad, but sometimes I think when you have a bunch of games that sort of chase one particular visual style, it's almost like a signal that, hey, we're probably going to start getting some mid-games that look like this, but thankfully, at least so far, Adventures of Elliot has not turned out to be one of them. And something else that turned me off of this game, which was completely unfair, was I just assumed because of the HD 2D presentation that this was probably going to be like a turn-based RPG, kind of like what I got from games like Octopath Traveler or Dragon Quest, but not the case at all. This is actually a top-down Zelda-like. And right off the bat, the movement in this game feels incredible. And that's because instead of just slowly walking around the top-down maps, you can actually move pretty fast thanks to a sprint that you get access to right off the bat. The combat is quick and engaging, and in sharp contrast to Navi from Zelda, Faye, your fairy buddy, is actually incredibly useful. And that's because interacting with Faye will let you swap between gliding around super fast or just straight up teleporting to her location. And both of these feel super rewarding in different ways. Gliding around is fun because it requires finesse to execute well, and if you slam into something you're going to be slowed down and left vulnerable for a second. Teleporting is also fulfilling whenever you finally have that aha moment which allows you to solve some environmental puzzle. Faye just feels like the developers took a hard look at everybody who ever screamed about hating Navi in Ocarina of Time and just really overcompensated in reworking the design. Because yes, Faye is helpful at pointing out things in the environment, she can be controlled independently to deal combat damage or to teleport like I've already mentioned, but most importantly she can be put away entirely. So if you don't want any additional dialogue or annoying handholding or anything like that, you can silence her pretty quickly. Something else I really appreciate is that the autosave system is pretty generous here, and it's also got plenty of challenges off the beaten path that are rewarding directly in the form of upgrades, and indirectly in that they're short enough to keep the pacing scooting along, but interesting enough that you actually enjoy rather than dread finding them. At no point did I ever stumble into a new area and feel like, oh man, I'm gonna get stuck here for an hour. Usually you could finish whatever challenge it had to present in like 5 to 10 minutes, so it really felt like a bonus rather than just, padding for the sake of extending the runtime of the game. Overall, so far, I just have to say it's overflowing with great gameplay. Now, I will say the story is almost unknown to me at this point, because at this point it just hasn't grabbed me in any significant way, but to be fair, I'm also still early, so that could change. And obviously the visuals are going to be a huge draw here. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's the kind of visuals that look the way you think you remember retro games from your childhood, but have actually been punched up significantly. And the fantasy genre in particular just hugely benefits from this kind of presentation where there's usually a lot of soft lighting and vivid exteriors. But yeah, again, I'm still technically playing the demo for this game, and at some point I hope I will actually transition to the full game, but man, there was a lot on offer here already, and you should definitely check out the demo if you have any interest in playing it, because even though I got it for the Switch 2, it is not a Switch 2 exclusive. You can get it just about anywhere, including a demo on Steam as well. But let's go ahead and round this list out with another one that is totally a cheat, but also, just like Adventures of Elliot, this game's demo progress will carry over. I thought I was going to spend more time playing the games I actually bought from the summer sale, but I actually got completely absorbed by this particular demo, which I highly recommend to any horror fans out there, and that would be Silver Pines. And I've been keeping an eye on this game for a while, not just because the aesthetic is a personal favorite of mine as a Silent Hill fan, but it just looked so visceral and the animation was just so intriguing to me, and I was really hopeful that the gameplay would be good as well, and I'm happy to report that it definitely is. It's got a 2.5D presentation that sort of makes it feel like the Paper Mario version of Silent Hill in a weird way. And without spoiling too much, I will just say that you do play as a detective who is looking for someone. The town is foggy and largely empty thanks to a coming storm, which is just one of my favorite setups in any type of fiction. Especially when it's like a small aquatic-based town that has some sort of a tourism industry attached to it, and everybody's just sort of clearing out because there's some horrible threat that's impending. There is just something so cozy about the setup, and I feel like Silver Pines is absolutely nailing it so far. Now, naturally, you're going to be walking around a lot of these environments, saving your game often, and you'll also have to make a lot of judgment calls about whether you should engage with an enemy or try to slip by unnoticed. And I have to say, the latter is not always an option. And the combat feels way more nuanced than I thought it was going to be for a 2D version of what is effectively Silent Hill. Normally when you're playing a 2D action game like a Metroidvania and you have to get up close and personal with an enemy who's getting closer and closer, usually your options are to slip by through a dodge, hide somewhere while you wait for them to go past, or engage in direct combat. And while I do like the tug-of-war feel of Silver Pines combat, where you're sort of judging how much stamina you're willing to expend against how much health you have left to decide if an encounter is worth it, I will say I'm definitely still struggling to get the hang of the combat. I don't think it's technically bad or anything, I think this is purely a skill issue on my part, but to be fair, I also wasn't expecting the combat to be this deep either. For me, it does feel like it gets a little bit too close to frustrating at times, not because it can't be mastered, but I think the animation just don't always do a good job of telegraphing the timing for a dodge, which, again, this could just be a skill issue on my part, but I feel like I'm noticing it in a way that I definitely didn't notice in something like Mina the Hollower. Although, to be fair, I think the primary draw of games like this isn't necessarily their combat so much as their atmosphere and story, and I have to say Silver Pines is really nailing both. I'm completely intrigued about the nature of the detective that we're playing as, why we're actually looking for this person, which I have not figured out yet, And based off of the just basic opening areas that I got to explore, like the town itself or a convenience store, it's hitting all of the right notes for me. And I can't remember off the top of my head when the full game is coming out, but I will definitely be there day one because this is one of the best horror games that I think I've enjoyed on the Steam Deck so far. And when it comes to performance on the Steam Deck, I don't think I was getting a flat 60, I think I was seeing some dips into like the mid 50s or something like that, but overall it was definitely a smooth experience that played well, and I had no control issues to speak of. But that's going to be it for this one. As always, this is not every game that I've picked up recently or from the Steam Summer Sale or anything. This is just me cherry picking a few games I've been having some fun with lately and kind of letting you know my thoughts. Coming up on the channel, we will be having some more Steam stuff. Sadly, not Steam Machine just yet. I'm still working on getting one, but we'll see what happens if Valve ever smiles upon me. And I will probably end up having to make a video on the whole Sony going discless thing because I do have a lot of thoughts about that, but yeah, I'm still working on that, so we'll see what happens. But that's going to be it for this one, and if you've been playing anything great, be it on Steam or otherwise, please do let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for your time and hanging out here on the channel with me. It really does mean a ton. Take care, and I will see you on the next one.